Mark Twain once said that history does not repeat, but it rhymes. Any logical look throughout human history, we will see the repeated pattern of birth, expansion, maturity, and eventual death of empires throughout the ages. The life cycle of empires and the new ages of man are nothing more than cunning men dominating nature and their fellow man with unsustainable collective paradigms. In the beginning, in order for man to survive this harsh earth, humanity had to band together in tribes to bring about collective effort necessary to feed, protect, and reproduce. They used collective effort to divide labor and thrive. They first learned how to pack hunt stronger animals. Then they learned to work with nature to harvest crops and build permanent shelters. In time, cunning men saw that there was more wealth to be had in dominating their fellow man than there would be in dominating the earth. These men soon saw that with violence, or at least the threat of violence, they could yield far more energy out of their fellow man than they could holding a sword to a plant and screaming at it for that to give them more. This gave rise to the psychopathic warrior class and eventual empires. Tribal wars and slavery proved to be a bloody effort that had diminishing returns. While conquering new lands gave rise to much new treasure, it wasn't sustainable. Then these cunning men came up with a new scheme, to have these slaves willingly sacrifice themselves to the cunning men at the top. They saw that, like their animals, free-range animals produce much more goods than caged animals. These cunning men devised religions and soon declared that there was an angry God in the sky that demanded their obedience. Soon the slaves sought to work harder to satisfy this angry God in the sky. And in some cases, these cunning men actually declared themselves God in form of pharaoh, king, and emperors. These cunning men became the chosen ones, and anyone that would follow them would reap their harvest.
Египтом, вот нам говорят, правили фараоны. Да фараоны это были мальчики, несмышленыши. Реальными правителями Египта было древнее египетское жречество. И вот они, владея тайными знаниями, которые принадлежали только им и которые они скрывали от остальных людей, они позволяли манипулировать сознанием не только неграмотной толпы, но и самих фараонов. Как там жрецы охмурили даже самого фараона и убили его, владея знаниями о затмении солнца.
Everybody can see that it is a massive bank theft perpetrated with taxpayer subsidies, and yet the CEO of Goldman Sachs over the weekend now claiming he's doing God's work.
Well, first of all, when I was at Goldman, we didn't have prayer meetings before deals.
You did or did not?
The whole God's work thing is a little odd. And I think they do understand the anger. I truly do not think they care.
Once these cunning men had sufficiently indoctrinated their people, like a cancer, they were never satisfied and soon spread. They soon sought about enforcing their divine will upon other tribes. This is more or less the age of written history, and ever since then, Mark Twain was right. We have rhymed the same bloody history from epoch to epoch.
And so to every sailor, soldier, airman, and Marine who's involved in this mission, let me say, you're doing God's work.
Empires would rise and fall in the name of religion, king, nation, and more recently, corporation. All run by cunning men trying to live beyond nature and become masters of their own universe. Every 80 years or so, or 4 generations, we seem to have a systemic crisis, a crisis for which our entire way of life hangs in the balance, and that there is no certainty in its outcome. For example, in the American experience, Americans won their freedom from their European masters, thus ending one collective power for an albeit different one. 4 generations later, they were slaughtering each other in the Civil War that left 860,000 men dead. 4 generations after the Civil War, we were in the depths of the Great Depression and World War II, that claimed an estimated 48 million casualties worldwide. In each of these great crises, it was never certain that America would go on to exist. Now, once again, it is 4 generations later, and we face an even larger threat to our way of life. There is yet another cycle that has rhymed recently, the so-called business cycle. This cycle is when the economy ebbs and flows with debt, boom to bust. In 1965, President Johnson took the silver out of our money.
le fait que beaucoup d'États acceptent par principe des dollars au même titre que de l'or pour les règlements des différences qui existent à leur profit dans la balance des paiements américaine, ce fait entraîne les Américains à s'endetter et à s'endetter gratuitement vis-à-vis de l'étranger, car ce qu'ils lui doivent, ils le lui payent, tout au moins en partie, avec des dollars qu'il ne tient qu'à eux d'émettre. Étant donné les conséquences que pourrait avoir une crise qui surviendrait dans un pareil domaine, nous pensons qu'il faut prendre à temps les moyens de l'éviter. Nous estimons nécessaire que les échanges internationaux soient établis, comme c'était le cas avant les grands malheurs du monde, sur une base monétaire indiscutable et qui ne porte la marque d'aucun pays en particulier. Quelle base? En vérité, on ne voit pas qu'il puisse y avoir réellement de critères, d'étalons autres que l'or.
And nearly 7 years later, Richard Nixon cut the last tie to the gold standard in 1971. This put us on a pure, fiat, debt-based dollar standard, with which there was no hard asset backing the value of the dollar. You see, paper money came into existence as a receipt for the real wealth. Now the cunning men had taken the real value out of our money, and now we were trading worthless receipts. This decoupling from the gold standard was in part the beginning of the petrodollar trade, where the cunning men in the West conspired with oil-producing nations to dramatically raise the price of oil under the guise of a concocted oil crisis. Under this conspiracy, oil-producing nations would only trade oil for dollars, thus securing the dollar's world reserve currency status. For this reinvestment of petrodollars back into the U.S. economy, in return for military protection against the Soviets at the height of the Cold War. This has led to a series of crises every 7 years that we've moved to a more unsustainable monetary system that would binge and purge assets and debts every 7 years. Starting with the 1973 oil crisis, we went until the stagflation crisis in 1980, where inflation got so bad that the privately owned Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates to close to 24%. 7 years later, we had the famous 1987 stock market crash that cost almost $500 billion to the U.S. economy. 7 years after that, we had the 1994 bond market massacre that destroyed $1 trillion of bondholder wealth. 7 years after that, we had the 2001 stock market collapse that led to $4.6 trillion in losses. 7 years after that, we had the housing bubble and the 2008 economic collapse.
On Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning, the Federal Reserve noticed a tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion was being drawn out in a matter of an hour or two. The Treasury opened up its window to help. They pumped $105 billion in the system and quickly realized that they could not stem the tide. We were having an electronic run on the banks. They decided to close the operation, close down the money accounts, and announce a guarantee of $250,000 per account so there wouldn't be further panic out there. And that's what actually happened. If they had not done that, their estimation was that by 2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours the world economy would have collapsed.
Which it is estimated that there were $12.8 trillion in losses. And now we're on the verge of the next 7-year cycle, And this one coincides with our even larger 80-year societal crisis. Why is it that we seem to be on this insane trip throughout all human existence? Why do the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Why must we always have wars and live in debt to our fellow man? Why can't we ever seem to break this cycle of history and enter into a new golden age of humanity? The answers to these questions and many more are found in this movie. Carl Jung once said that you can never solve a problem with the same consciousness that created the problem. We must see the world anew. Even George Orwell wrote that mankind will never be free until they become conscious, and until they become conscious, they will never become free. Now, cunning men would like to distract you into collectivist solutions for these collectivist problems. They will tell you that it's a moral problem and that we need more religion. Or they will tell you that it is a financial problem and talk of tax cuts or redistribution of wealth.
Facilitate some redistribution because I actually believe in redistribution.
They will tell you it's a political problem and roll out new candidates every few years. And when the problems get so large, the cunning men will say that there's some foreigner is the problem and start beating the war drums. If you were to remember one thing in this movie, remember this: there are no collectivist solutions to unconscious collectivist problems. There are only conscious individual solutions, like that of Silver Shield in this movie. The problem we face throughout all of humanity is not political, financial, religious, or military in nature. It is a battle of our consciousness.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. But life, that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing, is to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important. And however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
Or more accurately, our unconsciousness. It is about what we actively or passively support in our day-to-day living. The values, the structures, the men that we support with our votes, our consumptions, our corporate or military careers. We empower them. They do not control us. We have unconsciously accepted the fallacy of scarcity, collectivism, and dominating nature and our fellow man. These are the core reasons why humanity keeps repeating the sad history of debt and death. If we must see the world anew, then the logical solution must be individual, conscious, resonating abundance.
The first thing you do, you must know exactly what you want in this world. When you know exactly what you want, make as lifelike a representation as possible of what you would see and what you would touch and what you would do, and physically moving in such a state. While sitting in my chair, I would feel myself right into the situation of my fulfilled desire. And having felt myself into that state, I would not let it go. I would keep that mood alive, and in that mood, I would sleep. You know, people are totally unaware of this fantastic power of the imagination. But when man begins to discover this power within him, he never plays the part that he formerly played. He doesn't turn back and become just the reflective life. From here on in, he is the affected of life. The secret of it is to center your imagination in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain therein. For in our capacity to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled lies our capacity to live the more abundant life. Most of us are afraid to imagine ourselves as important and noble individuals, secure in our contribution to the world, just because at the very moment that we start our assumption, our senses deny the truth of our assumption. We seem to be in the grip of an unconscious urge, which makes us cling desperately to the world of familiar things and resist all that threatens to tear us away from our familiar and seemingly safe moorings. If I would make a living representation of the state desired, and then enter that state and abide in that state, I would realize it. But in essence, it's simple. You simply know what you want. When you know what you want, you are thinking of it. For what a man sees when he describes his world is as he describes it relative to himself. So what the world looks like depends entirely upon where I stand when I make my observation. So if, as I describe my world, it is related to that point in space I imagine that I am occupying, then I must be there. I am not there physically, no, but I am there in my imagination, and my imagination is my real self. And where I go in imagination and make it real, there I shall go in the flesh also. When in that state I fall asleep, it is done. I have never seen it fail. So this is the simple technique on how to use your imagination to realize your every objective. The abundant life promised us is ours to enjoy now, but not until we have the sense of the Creator as our imagination can we experience it. Persistent imagination, centered in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, is the secret of all successful operations. This alone is the means of fulfilling the intention. Every stage of man's progress is made by the conscious, voluntary exercise of the imagination. Then you will understand why all poets have stressed the importance of controlled, vivid imagination. Listen to this one by the great William Blake. In your own bosom you bear your heaven and earth, and all you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. Try it, and you too will prove that your imagination is the Creator.
The earth has far more than enough for humanity to thrive if we live sustainably. Humanity has much more in common with each other than these cunning men would like us to know. And the individual can now see the world as it is and consciously choose to get off this mad rhyming trip throughout the ages. Not only to shield you from the coming collapse, but to create generational wealth large enough to establish a new conscious, resonating way of life. Now I want you to know something. This is not pie-in-the-sky utopian talk. I was once somebody that profited very much off of this debt and death paradigm. I went to Boston College. I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps Infantry, and I was a successful business owner. And when I came face to face with the truth that I'm going to share with you in this movie, I had to walk away. I could no longer do what I did, knowing what I knew now. The process was very difficult, but ultimately it was the best thing that I've ever done. So I'm going to let you know that I have walked the talk, and I have made radical changes in my life to shield myself and those that I love. I've spent more than a decade studying and thinking about these questions, not only to describe just how messed up this world is, but how one can break this cycle. And half of that time, I've been trying to wake up others to this reality. With my epic Sons of Liberty Academy, and the past 4 years here on YouTube with The Greatest Truth Never Told. But with this final movie, I'm done reaching out, because at some point, which I feel is very soon, it will either become too late or too dangerous to speak such truth. With the verge of the next 7-year crisis and the 80-year societal crisis upon us, there is little time left to teach and learn, much less prepare. While the challenges we face are great, one cannot deny that we're reaching a quickening in the consciousness of humanity. It took thousands of years to move past hunter-gatherer to an agrarian society. It took centuries for us to move into an industrial society. It took decades for us to reach a technological society. It took years for us to reach an informational society. Now it is time for us to reach the final age of man, one of a fully conscious society.
If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-size understanding. When you look out, a golf ball-size awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-size wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter.
With the advent of the internet, there is no excuse for humanity to still be functioning on this low level of consciousness. No excuse to empower the cunning men at the top that sap our energy and spread their sickness with debt and death. And soon, with the single largest event in human history upon us, with the dollar collapse, there will be no excuse to not question what we as a humanity have been unconsciously doing with our short time here on Earth. Over the past 4 years here on YouTube, I've created over 1,000 videos trying to help others to see what I see. More importantly, I want to give them the confidence to take the kind of action necessary to shield themselves and their family from the next great upheaval in society. With this final effort, I'm leaving you with this movie to try to help others who have not been exposed to the greatest truth never told. This movie, while it is long, is only a few hours of your life and the culmination of 10 years of study and the essence of 1,000 videos here on this YouTube channel. I promise you that it is well worth your time, and if I'm successful, it will be life-changing. It is said that men go mad in herds and only come to their senses slowly and one by one. Charles Mackay. It is my hope that with this one movie, we will consciously arouse the unique individual inside all of you. The one that has been beaten into collective submission by cunning men that seek to take your life's energy. So you can light the fire inside of you. To logically see the world is truly messed up, but your life doesn't have to be. I ask you that you not only give this movie time, but recommend it to others, as I am sure it is the most effective means of unraveling thousands of years of collective unconscious indoctrination. Please rate, comment, share, and subscribe. And I now present to you the Silver Shield.